I'm Laura Roth with Daughters of the American Revolution. This is Mike Petersen. It's February 20th, 2024, and we are in Chaska, Minnesota. So, Mike, we know you were in the Navy during Vietnam, but we'll back up a little bit. Where were you born?
Well, I was born in Fergus Falls, Minnesota, and my dad was in sales, so we traveled around a lot, eventually living in North Dakota, Montana, Colorado. Came back to Minnesota as a junior in high school. One of the things about my life, because I moved, I wasn't able to make close friends, and that was really hard, going to new schools. And I lacked confidence. And when I came back to Fergus, I was elected as a junior. I was elected president of the student council, and that pointed out to me that I was a person of value. People liked me. And that was a really important part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
But then I went on to Morehead State College. I went into education, but the kids in the school were all, it was a campus school, so they'd had student teachers from the beginning, from kindergarten, and they knew how to handle student teachers. And I had such a bad experience student teaching that I decided I wouldn't go into education. So in college, my chemistry professor asked me about, well, if I was interested in maybe going into the Navy and seeing the world. And well, golly, I wasn't going to be a teacher, so I might as well see the world. And his name was, he was a lieutenant commander, Dennis Krasaniak. And he asked me, and I said, well, I'd like to explore a little bit more about this. I really didn't have any family members who had been in the military, so I didn't really know the difference between an enlisted person and an officer. And when Mr. Krasaniak was explaining to me, come into the Navy and see the world, he was talking about an officer program. So he said, well, this is what you do. You go to the Reserve Center, you raise your right hand and say, I do, and all that sort of thing, which I did. And then I said, sir, when do I go to Officer Candidate School and get this ball rolling so I can start seeing the world? And he said, well, Mike, maybe I didn't explain this really correctly. You're enlisted now. You're the kind of the working force. You get the job done. Now you have to become an officer. Well, I said, how do you have to do that? He said, well, you take a lot of tests and all this. Oh, I was a little disappointed then because I didn't know if I'd pass all those tests. Fortunately, I did. And when I graduated from Morehead State in 1966, I had orders to flight school in Pensacola, Florida. So that was the start of my active duty in the Navy.
Oh, so when you first joined, did you join? What were your
Well,
what was your job?
I was enlisted. Oh, now I know there's going to be a lot of folks who are enlisted, who have been enlisted, who are going to be watching this. I was a radioman. Now that was while I was going to college. I would go to monthly meetings and then 2 weeks of active duty. And it came time to take my E4 exam. That was for radioman, third class. And I couldn't pass the exam. So what did the Navy do? I couldn't pass the enlisted exam, so they made me an officer. Oh, you guys are watching this, well, listen, I know you'll get a heck of a kick out of that. Now, there's a little more to the story than that, but that's what happened. I tell that story, oh my goodness, the folks that get crazy about that. We enlisted people, we know what those officers. So, I spent 18 months in Pensacola, Florida. I ended up being a helicopter pilot. During that time, Navy pilots, we fly fixed wing initially, so I made 7 landings in the T-28 on the aircraft carrier Lexington. That's a big deal for Navy pilots landing on the carrier. And we didn't have catapults, we had fixed wing. There were 1,800 horsepower, so we had enough power to get off the deck without the cat being shot off. So how'd you know when you were supposed to take off? You're sitting on the deck, you're ready to go. It's when the person in front of you, when he takes off, he goes down below the deck, so you can't see him. You don't know if he went in the water, but typically, almost all the time, you'll see him, pick up. That's when you blow power off, you go. So that was an exciting time. Now, I wasn't the best student in flight school. I wanted to fly A4s. That's the little fast attack aircraft. But because I wasn't one of the better students, the highest grades they get their choice. The folks on the lower end of the spectrum, they get what the Navy has left over. So I got helicopters. They want me to go low and slow. But as God would have it, I was thankful that I did get those orders to Helicopter Attack Light Squadron 3 in Vietnam. Turned out it's the most decorated squadron in Navy history. The squadron was formed in 1967. It was decommissioned in Vietnam. They never had this squadron in U.S. territory. The squadron was formed because the Navy had patrol boats, went up and down the rivers. The Viet Cong were taxing the local people, and we wanted to keep those waterways free of the Viet Cong so that the locals could do their business, take their rice to market, that sort of thing. And these patrol boats were always under attack, and they always needed helicopter support. And the Army always had their helos committed to other actions. We wanted help from the Army. It wasn't available. So the Navy went to the Army and said, please, give us some of your helos, train us, and we'll do the job ourselves. The Army was kind enough to give us 16 Huey gunships. All of them could not fly. Not one of them could fly. They were underpowered. They were the B models. The Navy or the Army helped us in terms of how to get the engines and that sort of thing. They did send us to Fort Benning, Georgia, to learn tactics. But we even had beer cans on the side of the helicopter to cover the bullet holes in the helicopter. Now, they were not unsafe to fly. None of us would fly the aircraft if it were. So the Army trained our enlisted folks how to train, how to repair, etc. So they flew well. They were underpowered, but we got the job done. And our job then, well, quite frankly, I would say only about maybe 20% of the time was spent actually helping Navy assets. Most of the time, the compounds, normally with 2 or 3 American advisors along the rivers, were the ones that were coming under attack, and that's probably where we spent the majority of our time. The Vietnam War was screwed up. It was very political. Now, as we look back on Vietnam, none of us should have been there. But we were there, our country asked us to go, we went. But to show how screwed up it was, we could only engage the enemy 2 clicks from the center of the river, the Mekong River. So what would the Viet Cong do? 2.5 clicks? So if the American military had only been given the go-ahead, we would have cleared out the Viet Cong and the NVA, but we were never given that opportunity. I spent 8 months flying. I flew in that amount of time 269 combat missions, where I earned 17 air medals and the Purple Heart. Now, anybody watching this tape, they're going to say, my goodness, he really flew a lot of missions. The average helicopter pilot in our squadron flew 350 missions. I only flew for 8 months. That's why I flew the 269. One of my fellow pilots, I'll only say his first name, Dick. He came to our detachment. He's the only pilot that spent 2 tours in the squadron. He flew 1,300 missions. And quite frankly, flew more missions than any pilot in U.S. history. But he's very modest about it. To be honest, I don't know if anybody really knows that. I did some research. I couldn't find anybody. There was some other helicopter pilots that flew medevac that flew more, but not combat missions. After the 8 months, I was asked to go to, well, I was ordered to go to work with Admiral Zumwalt, Commander Naval Forces, Vietnam. The politics of the war at that time was we want to get out. And we were going to turn over all of our assets to the Vietnamese. So I and one other pilot from our squadron represented our squadron in helping turn over these assets. How do we go about doing it? And they called it the Vietnamization of the war. And quite frankly, the Vietnamese people, so few people were interested in the war. The Vietnamization of the people, it didn't work out. And I spent 4 months in Saigon working with Admiral Zumwalt and his staff. And then I came home in March of '68. So I was there, I got there in March of '68, 1 month after Tet. And I left March of 1969. And Laura, you asked if I would share a little bit about the Purple Heart that I received. We were on a combat mission. The Viet Cong were shooting at us, we were shooting at them. And something hit me in the leg, or I felt something in the leg. It was my left leg, and it was about like that. No pain. And I yelled to the door gunners behind me. I said, quit brassing me. And the 2 door gunners sitting behind, they have M60s. The machine gun shoots out 600 rounds a minute. And sometimes the brass casings, they're hot. And they sometimes go down your neck. Very uncomfortable. Well, that's the first thing I could think of was that it was this brass casing. I don't know why, but there's a lot of adrenaline going on at this time. And they said, sir, we're not brassing you. Well, we finished the mission. And we landed, and I opened up the door of the helicopter, and the door swung off its hinges. And what had happened was that the enemy, the Viet Cong, the bullet had hit the hinge. And really the only hard metal, everything else is plexiglass and aluminum. The only thing, it hit the hinge, and then I got shrapnel in my leg. And the doc, taped me up, and I was flying the next day. Now, when you see bodies of men who've died and men who have given up their limbs for the Purple Heart, Laura, you don't really feel that you deserve that Purple Heart. And my admin officer came to me and said, Mike, we're putting you in for the Purple Heart. And I said, Pat, I don't want the Purple Heart. That was all that was said. About 6 weeks later at quarters, the commanding officer of our squadron came and pinned medals on all of us, and I received the Purple Heart. I'm so honored now that I have the Purple Heart, because so many men have given so much of themselves. War is sometimes we see the men marching and we're in colors and but it's something that I could see the Viet Cong. I could see them dying. People who were not getting shot at or not part of the war, they're making these kinds of decisions. I think that we all have regrets about what happened. I think all people who are in that kind of situation, they're patriots, they're fighting for their country, but it's a really difficult time, Laura, for all men and women who have suffered these kinds of feelings and situations.
How do you recover from that? How do you keep moving forward?
Many people cannot. My brother, Mark, in the 101st Airborne, he was there about 3 years after I was. And he has PTSD. At that time, they didn't know what it was even called. A little side story. This last year, I got a note from our VFW. Well, it came out to all of us, the VFW members. Say, is there anybody that would like to volunteer to be in a movie? No speaking part, but just be in the movie. Well, I give patriotic speeches, so they thought about me and they said, hey, Mike, how would you like to do this? Well, tell me all about it. Yeah, that sounds fine. And it was shot here in Chaska, and I can't think of the name of it. It hasn't come out yet. It'll be probably another year before it comes out. But it turned out that one of the director's dad was the head of the VA, and he was the first to diagnose the problem as PTSD. And he really helped a lot of veterans in the question that you asked, how do you get through this? Because he did the training for the doctors that were treating the PTSD disorders. And I'd mentioned to you, Laura, that I'm going to be speaking at the Vietnam Wall this Memorial Day. And the director, whose dad is now, he's in his early 90s, she said that, because I knew I was being considered to have this honor, and she asked me, when the decision is made, if you are the speaker, I want to know, because maybe Dad would like to come. And they had been at the very first Vietnam Wall gathering back in, I believe it was 1983 or 84. It was a non-speaking part, but it was about Vietnam. Um, the person that I represented was a friend of the person who died, whose daughter the story was about. And I think some of it was related to the director's dad and the knowledge that he had about the trauma that the veterans are suffering. So now what's next? We got into some heavy stuff, but it's on my heart, so I think it's important to share.
It's definitely important. I don't know anything about air medals.
Yes.
What are the qualifications? What happened? How do you earn that?
You get air medals for different things that you do. You don't have to be a hero. You just have to fly the missions. Typically, it's about 20 missions, combat missions. You shoot, they shoot at you. That's a combat mission. And that score, what my score added up to was 17. It was actually 16 air medals, but I got one, what was called a single action air medal. I identified a group of people that turned out to be Viet Cong, and there was some unusual activity around what appeared to be a granary, and lo and behold, it was an ammunition depot, and we attacked, and so I got an extra air medal for identifying that on that particular mission I was flying as co-pilot.
Oh wow. Let's take a different turn.
Okay.
Can you share any humorous
Yes, I can.
memories?
Yes, I can.
What are some of those?
Now we were on duty 24 hours a day, one day, and then we were off 24 hours.
Uh-huh.
But during that 24 hours, we slept in what we call the hooch on the line, on the flight line, and we would get calls in the middle of the night. We had our boots. We all went to the Vietnamese Mama San, and she sewed up. She put zippers on our boots so we could get into them real fast. And one night, scramble, off we went. I felt something in my toe. Well, now you're getting shot at. You're not thinking a lot about your toe. You come back. You're kind of interested. What's going on in my toe? And of course, the little mouse jumped up and he looked at me. He said, "Oh, that was one hell of a ride." I think that was probably the most humorous thing that happened.
Oh, that's cute. What about friendships? Talk to me a little bit about important relationships.
Yes. I'll only say his first name, Ray. He was Cuban. He was a full lieutenant. I was a junior lieutenant JG, so he was one full rank above me. Ray took me under his wing, and I felt Ray was like a second dad to me. He knew how much stress I was involved in, and he was just a loving, caring man, and he did this with everyone. Everybody cared for him. He was like a dad to all of us. When the Bay of Pigs took place, he was going to be, he would have a very high-ranking position in the Navy, but then the Bay of Pigs in Cuba didn't end successfully, so he then became a Navy pilot. Another friend, Joe. Joe was, we got to our detachment in Vinlong at the same time. Joe was from, I believe, South Carolina, and when he was going to finish his tour as a Navy pilot, he was going to go back into the ministry. He was just a nifty guy. He had that southern drawl. We flew a lot together. Sadly, they'd been in a firefight with the NVA, North Vietnamese, and they shot Joe down. The pilot, the whole crew survived the crash, and Joe was able to get into the rescue helicopter, and as they lifted off, he was shot in the heart, died instantly. So, friends, I care so much for these friends, but some of them are not here any longer. They gave their life for our country. Something that's important. And I would ask anybody who's watching this, if I mentioned that I was going to speak at the Vietnam Wall. Part of that is going to be those men and women who don't want to stand for our national anthem and want to burn our flag. I talk about that at the wall. No one is offended. Even the people who stomp on the flag, they're not offended. But I want them to learn that men like my good friend Joe, who died for us and for that flag, that people should give second thoughts to what they're doing in disrespecting those people who have paid the kinds of price that many people don't think of. Again, I'm kind of serious, so maybe we should talk about something a little lighter. Now, we talked about, you kind of got the direction, something funny. Well, after Vietnam, I had orders to Lakehurst, New Jersey. Our squadron, Helicopter Combat Support Squadron 4, flew off non-aviation ships. That is, we flew not on aircraft carriers. My first ship that I spent 6 months on was an LPD. It was the LaSalle. It was attached. It was a part of the Gator Navy in the Med. We had a battalion of Marines on board. Well, there were 5 ships that was part of that Ready Reaction Force in the Med. If something happened in that part of the world, this battalion of Marines were there to do what was necessary. My job on the LPD, the helicopter that we had, was an administrative helicopter. It wasn't an attack helicopter. But we would, if somebody got hurt, we'd take them to the hospital. We'd haul the mail if they needed parts from one ship to another. It was an administrative type of mission that we had. I also flew for Admiral Miller off of the USS Newport News. We had a tour in the Mediterranean. And then I became a flight instructor in Pensacola for 2 years, training both Navy and Marine Corps aviators. And then the war was wrapping up in Vietnam. I really wanted to stay in the Navy, but at that time they were releasing almost 100% of the pilots. And so I was released in December of 1971. And I went into the insurance business in Pensacola, eventually became a home builder and did some developing. Then in 1981, when the real estate interest rates, mortgage interest rates went up to 18%, I went to my banker and asked him, well, can I borrow some more money to build more houses? He said, well, how many of these houses do you have sold? I said, well, 18% interest, I can't sell any of them. I'm sorry, I can't send you or give you any more money. So I ended my building and real estate business, came back to Minnesota, and got into the insurance business. And I still have an insurance agency. I'm 80 years old, but I feel good, so I don't do any new marketing to clients, but I have several hundred clients that they call me up and they say, well, Mike, what do we do now this coming January? Maybe I should change policies. Maybe I'm not getting the right prescriptions in this policy. So I help them. And you know, a philosophy that I have, Laura, is when you get up in the morning, you better have purpose in your life, and you better have. Now, maybe a lot of people don't agree with this, but I think you should have a little bit of something that makes you anxious. You got to have purpose, and you got to have it keeps you on your toes. So, a little anxiety and some purpose is what I attribute my 80 years to now. So, next question.
I don't normally make comments, but I love that.
Well, thank you.
I think that's fantastic advice, and I've never heard that before, and I love it.
Maybe the anxiety could be defined as stress also, just a little bit. We can't overstress ourselves. Now, our American way of life, I wouldn't change it for anything. Capitalism. But there's some stress in capitalism. There are people who think about socialism. Oh man, I get out of bed, I could wander over here, or somebody's going to pay my insurance, or I get free hospitalization. My goodness, who wants to live like that? Yeah. I want capitalism with a big C. Yes, give me a little stress, but it gives us opportunity to fulfill our dreams. Be a socialist, no dreams, just do as they say.
Oh, what a fantastic outlook.
Thank you.
Did you, as a helicopter pilot, did you ever carry anything with you or do anything for good luck?
For good
luck. Did you ever, some people have a loved one's picture with them or carry something with them or do a certain something?
No.
Nothing?
No. There were times when in Vietnam where we would pick up sometimes injured Vietnamese. There were things that Americans did that were so above and beyond what warriors do. Americans have the biggest heart. They're a giving nation. We all want to help our fellow man. In this day and time, I should say, also fellow woman.
Definitely.
I carry the thoughts, I guess, but I don't carry anything in, like a lot of people carry a wristband with somebody's name on it. I haven't done that.
What would you say was, I hesitate to say the word best part of your service experience, but best, most memorable, most positive?
You know, Laura, I can't identify one thing. It was in total. It was the honor to serve this great country all the years that I served. and all of the people that I served with, and all of the great things that our country has done. And I'm very saddened by what I see of what is happening in our country today. This country is not the same country that I was brought up in. There are parts of our country that they are not American. They are not doing what America was founded on. Our forefathers, they couldn't believe what is happening today. I can hardly believe what is happening today. But there has to be a change in the direction we're going, because our country does not have that many more years to be this great country that we have known in the past.
After you came home from Vietnam, how many years did you serve in the reserves? Was it Naval Reserves?
Yes. Now, I was only in Vietnam 1 year, and that was my first year.
Mm-hmm.
Then I was 2 years in Lakehurst, New Jersey, on the non-aviation ships. And then I was 2 years in Pensacola as a flight instructor. I had a total of 7 years. And then the remaining 20 years was in the reserves, the Naval Reserves. I served with NES Alameda as a reservist, so we'd spend 2 weeks in Alameda. I served in a carrier air group headquartered out of Naples, Italy. We'd go to Italy for 2 weeks in the summer. And we were just standing by. If our country needed us, we would go where our country needed us. At that time, the reserves didn't play the important part that reservists now play. If you go in the reserves now, you're almost always going to be called to active duty. That wasn't the case. I was never called to active duty. I just spend my 2 weeks of active duty, and then one weekend per month during my reserves.
Where did you do the 1 weekend a month? You were living in Minnesota
yes.
at the time.
Well, let's back up. I started in the reserves in Pensacola, and we went to New Orleans. And I was attached to the carrier air group in New Orleans. And then I moved to Houston, Texas, and I was more in an administrative, they didn't have a position for me, so I was in an administrative type situation. Then I came back to Minneapolis, served in the reserves here. That was when I was attached to NES Alameda. And the last couple of years, they didn't have a position, so it was an administrative group. It was kind of self-study the last 2 years. Then I got off. I ended my Navy 27 years at Minneapolis Naval Air Station, and that ended in 1989. Is it either 1989 or 1991? I'm 80 years old. How can I remember those things?
I won't with you. Do you remember your last day of service? Was it memorable, or was it? Okay,
No, it wasn't. Actually, I had completed a correspondence course. That's what ended my career. So there was nothing spectacular about, other than a heavy heart that it was done.
Did your family throw you a party or anything?
No, they didn't. Actually, it was only my wife that knew about it. I think we did go out to dinner, and I think she paid.
Well, there you go.
How are we doing for time?
We're doing great.
Okay. Should we talk about some personal things?
I'd love to.
Okay. I was divorced And I was 7 years divorced. I had a wonderful daughter, Kimberly, who I had mentioned earlier that I have 3 grandchildren now. But I love to dance. And I was in sales, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I was out selling Medicare programs. Thursday night, I would come back to Minneapolis. I was living in Burnsville at the time. And I'd go to a place called Stonewings. And it was a dance place. Now, a lot of people call it a meat market. We'll call it like it is. So I go and I love to dance, and every Thursday night I'd be dancing. Well, one of those Thursdays, a good friend of mine, Gene Bergen, he flew Phantoms in the Navy. He owned Burnsville Floral. And I went over to pick him up, and he had a whole bunch of carnations that he was pushing into the garbage can. And I said, now they were out of date. He couldn't sell them. I said, Gene, when we go to Stonewings tonight, let's take some of these carnations with us, because I know we're going to really do good by the carnations. Lo and behold, we come into Stonewings, and I see these 2 attractive ladies chatting. And of course, I want to dance. So I come up with a carnation, and I ask Suzanne if she would like to dance. And she said, no, thank you. So I said, here is this carnation. Would you wave that carnation? I'll be just sitting over here. When you wave that carnation, then I'll know you're ready to dance. Would that be okay? Because I wanted to dance with her. She said, yes. Laura, I'm impatient. No carnation waving. So I go up to her and ask, excuse me, but the time is going by. Would you like to dance? And she said, okay. Now, Laura, you're not going to believe this. And a lot of the folks who are watching are not going to believe this. In the first 3 dances, I asked her, well, I guess it was 2 dances that I asked her, and then 1 dance that was a statement. But I first asked her if she was religious. The second question was, would she consider having more children? Now, this is in the second dance. Now, I'd never asked anyone these questions before. And the third, not a question, but a statement, I said, I have the softest kiss, and I'd like to dance you over into the corner and kiss you. Now you're wondering, what were the answers to these questions? The first question, are you religious? And she was very religious. Now, why would I ask her if she would consider having more children in the second dance? And the reason was, I wanted to be a dad, and my daughter Kimberly had been taken out of the country by my wife, my ex-wife, and I couldn't have a relationship with her. And that weighed really heavy on my heart. So that was the reason that I asked that question. And she said yes. Suzanne had 2 children. And she said yes, she would consider that. She knew there was something going on when I asked that question. It wasn't lightly said. And the third, the statement, the soft kiss, she said absolutely no. And then we were married 4 months later. Now, Laura, you have to suspect that there was a third party involved. And that was God. God had a big hand in our meeting, and he's been a great part of our lives for almost 40 years now. Thank you, God.
Oh, that is.
Now that's the personal part. Okay, what's next?
And did you 2 ever have children together?
No. we attempted. I'll share this story because it's kind of an unusual story in terms of medical. Suzanne thought that she was pregnant, went to the doctor, and you're pregnant. She was even starting to grow, but when they took the whatever the sonogram or whatever, there was no baby forming, and it was called a blighted ovum. Not many people are aware of it, and then it discharged naturally, and but that was at that time we made the decision not to have more children, and that's when my daughter Kim was came to visit.
How old was she?
She was a sophomore in high school at that time. We went through a lot of court things to have her come, and then she came to live with us, and she was troubled. She had lived in a foreign country in the Dominican Republic, ran with a wild crowd, got into drinking and drugs, and then ran away from home. And I didn't know where she was for a year. That was really hard on both Suzanne and I. But when she came to live with us, we knew that she had these issues going on in her life, and that's when we decided not to have another child, because we wanted to devote our love and attention to Kim. And it was a hard time then, but as I've shared, she's the greatest mom in the world now, 3 great grandchildren. So for the folks who are watching now and who are having difficulty with those darn kids, they grow out of it. They get better and they get loving and they give you grandkids. So
sometimes we have to go through the bitter to appreciate the sweet.
Almost always. Really, that is so true. God makes it fair, I guess. He gives us a little of the bad and then a little bit of the good, and we have to take it all in stride and keep God on our side.
That's beautiful.
Because He's helping us all the time.
He sure is. Are there any memories or anything that you would want to share about your military service that we haven't already covered? I mean, you had such a career, and we have such a short interview. I want to make sure we cover.
Well, going through flight school, I'll just share a little incident. Remember I told you in the beginning that I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I was in, it was primary flight training. Captain Petersen, Marine Corps. Oh, he was a tough guy. He was my instructor. Well, I'm a pretty easygoing guy, and when somebody raises their voice, I get all, I can't think. I'm thinking more about the personal things. He gave me a down. Now that's a big thing for when you're in the flight program. You only get 2 downs.
What does that mean?
That means you're not progressing normally, and you're going to get 2 extra flights, and then you get a recheck, and if you don't pass that, you're out. Well, he gave me a down, and then you can ask for a new instructor too. Well, I thought about that, and I went to the training officer, and he said, "Who did you like to have as your instructor?" And I said, "I want Captain Petersen." And I went back to that so-and-so, because I knew he was a hell of a good guy. He treated me with kid gloves after that. He was the nicest instructor. I couldn't believe it. He got me through that program and then it's typical that at the end of flight training, when your primary instructor gets you to solo, he asks you for a bottle. And I asked him, "Sir, Captain Petersen, what bottle do you want?" He says, "I want wild turkey." So since that time, I have loved wild turkey. Oh, and by the way, I used to raise turkeys. Now,
Not wild ones, though.
not wild ones, no. I didn't go to college the first year. I went to Wisconsin, raised turkeys. And I thought I might want to go into politics. When you have 20,000 turkeys out there, all you have to do is raise your voice. I'd say, "Hear ye! 20,000 turkeys, all gobbling their heads up." I swore I was going to be a great politician. But, so that's kind of related to the wild turkey story that I got. I guess we are a little astray, but in what we're talking about.
Oh, no, it was wonderful.
Let's see. Landing on the carrier was really, really exciting. I've had a very exciting life. Can we talk about other things in life?
Please, sure.
I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro.
Oh,
Now, you won't believe this, and the folks who are listening to this won't believe this. I am terrified of height.
of course.
I'm
you
a
are.
pilot. I'm terrified of height. So I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. Now, I did a lot of reading about it, and I wanted to know how far I was going to be looking down as I'm climbing. Now, when I say I climb Mount Kilimanjaro, you see me with spikes on and ropes and all this and going up the sheer sheet. It wasn't like this at all. There's 7 or 8 ways to get to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. One of those is called the Coke route, the Coca-Cola route.
Oh,
That is, you drink Coke and you walk. Yes, it's a little. Well, actually, in the group that I went up in on the Coke route, there was probably 30% of the people that didn't make it. And I was 59 years old at the time that I did this. On the way up, I saw a stretcher with a wheel on it. I said, "What's that?" And well, sometimes we have to carry people down on the mountain. I said, "I won't need that." Well, lo and behold, I was on that stretcher coming down. I got hypoxia. I got sick though from the high altitude. It's called high altitude sickness. But I made it to the top, and it did take 5 days to get up and back down. That's one highlight of my trip, of my life. I loved living on the farm when I was a kid. Oh, I loved animals. I could tell you a little story about Sparky.
go for it.
Sparky is going to be 4 years old on the 28th of March. Schnauzer. He's the most lovable dog, and he's the 4th Schnauzer that we've had. All of them are great dogs, but Sparky, he's the greatest. He loves to be in my lap, and he said goodbye to me. He was very upset this morning when I left. He wants to go. Every place I go, he wants to go. And normally I take him, but I knew this was going to take a little while, so I couldn't have him on the car that length of time. I think we've covered a lot of things
Out of
today.
curiosity, I know you mentioned being in the Legion, or was it VFW?
I'm a life member of both the Chaska American Legion and the Chaska VFW. Actually, I'm the chaplain in both. Have you ever heard of a cootie?
No.
Okay. The cooties are an organization part of the VFW, and their goal is to help people who have health-related issues. Maybe in the nursing home, they're sick. They've lost a loved one. They need some care. Started in about 1900 by the VFW. I'm the chaplain for the cooties. As a matter of fact, we had a meeting last night, and I don't think we shared this about the honoring veterans with this videotape. I think we talked about that before.
Yeah, please.
I've had the honor to go to different nursing homes and gather the history of the veterans. And you can imagine, and anybody who's watching can imagine, if you have to go to the nursing home, you're thinking, my goodness, my life is really over now. I'm in the nursing home. And I wanted to honor these people. I gathered their history, and then a group of these in the nursing home, we would have a ceremony. Invite the parents, but more importantly, we'd invite the grandkids and the great grandkids, and they would read the history of these patriots, their grandpas and grandmas, and as I shared with you, not a dry eye. When those kids were reading those histories, and the parents of those kids feeling just so emotional about what they've done for our country. And as a matter of fact, just last night, the Cooties, we are planning, we've been aligning ourselves with the Auburn Manor, the nursing home here in town. We've had several meetings with the group, and now we're going to be meeting with them on an individual basis, gathering the history, and then having the ceremony. It'll probably happen in the next 3 or 4 months, but it's such an honor to learn about the histories, and it's such an honor to see the kids not knowing about their grandparents, and then learning all of these things, and we feel so much a part of bringing these folks together and sharing this.
That's so beautiful.
And the Cooties, it's a funny group. We don't go to a meeting, we go to a scratch. When we go to the meeting, we have to wear, and I don't have it on now, we wear a little Cootie pin. If we don't have the pin on our collar, we get fined. And they find all ways to fine us. Last night, I got fined because I had my hat on and I was eating a donut. Oh, it's a fine. But it's a humorous group. And as a matter of fact, did you mention that you were at St. Cloud doing volunteer work? Uh-huh. Well, just 2 weeks ago, we were at the St. Cloud VA doing bingo and shooting baskets with the vets. And so that's what we do, the Cooties. And it's just a great joy to have camaraderie with these folks.
Oh, that's fantastic. Do you ever go to military reunions of any sort?
Yes. That question brings a lot of heaviness in my heart. The squadron that I flew in, the most decorated squadron in Navy history, I got sideways with some of the men that I served with, and I would not go to any reunion. And 2 years ago, the Flying Cloud Airport has a fly program, an air show. And my wife and I, Suzanne and I, have gone to that air show over the last 10 or 12 years, I think 3 times. And I wrote to the director, or I thought it was the director, and I said, "Say, I served with a Navy squadron in Vietnam, and I think maybe this would be something nice for you to have at your air show. Not that you'd have an aircraft, but I could be there answering questions and that stuff. Oh, we'd love to have you come. Can you bring some more?" I said, well, of course. So I contacted actually the pilot that has flown the most combat missions in American history. And I asked, and then he suggested one of the door gunners, and then that door gunner suggested another one of the members of the squadron. So the 4 of us represented the Navy Seawolves in Eden Prairie at the Flying Cloud Airport. And all of the 3 of them asked me, "Why haven't you been to any of our reunions?" And I shared with them. I got sideways with some some of the folks there, and I just didn't want to go to any of the reunions. And they said, Mike, that time is done. Come to our reunion. So I did. I went. And it was very, very enriching for me to go.
And that was just a couple of years ago, did you say?
That was only a year ago. That was last, let's see. It was 1 year ago. It was in October, not this past October, and we went to Oklahoma City.
How healing was that?
It was very, very healing. Some of the folks that I got sideways with weren't there, but I know that it's war. You know, we act outside ourselves. You know, it's, but that's in the past now. And I think that every person who serves in these kinds of situations, they'll have regrets, they'll have happiness, all of these things go on. But it was very helpful for me. Pardon my telephone. You know, because I'm 80 years old, I'm very low tech. I can't even shut that telephone off. So we're going to let that telephone ring.
That's just fine.
Because it'll stop pretty
It'll
soon.
stop eventually.
And now, Laura, would you believe that I'm heading up the reunion here in Minneapolis next year?
You're kidding.
Yes.
Oh.
And now, this is not for really publication outside our squadron. But we're having our reunion, Seabolt reunion.
And you're organizing.
And well, I'm because I live here.
Sure.
I did make the presentation at the reunion in Oklahoma, and because my presentation was the best, and the other three guys, I really prepared for it. I talked to the hotels. I got that information. The other guys just came and said, "Oh, come over here." Or this. Well, because I was the most prepared, they voted on it there. They said, Mike, we'd like you to help us because I live here. There are other people hitting it up.
Yeah.
But I've kind of suggested where to go, what sites we're going to see, and that sort of thing. So,
neat.
So it's very exciting.
I'm also really curious, how did you get chosen to speak at the Vietnam War Memorial?
Yes. I had mentioned that I do patriotic speeches.
Uh-huh.
You have to listen to one of my talks, and quite frankly, the talk is the same. Each talk I've given is the same, with the exception of maybe the beginning, and it depends on where we are. But the bulk of the talk is the same. I spoke this past Memorial Day at the Fort Snelling National Cemetery. Governor Walz was there. Senator Klobuchar was there. And after every talk that I have given, the folks in the audience come up to say, and the most common theme that they say is, Mike, every American should hear this talk. Well, that talk at Fort Snelling was videotaped. And I sent that to the Vietnam Memorial. And I asked, would you consider having me speak? It only took about 3 or 4 days later, and they came back and they said, we were considering other people. We'll get back to you in a couple of weeks. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. Well, I'm not going to be asked. And then I got an email. We would be honored to have you speak. So there I am.
Wow.
And I'll have to share this also. Remember I said I kind of lacked confidence because of my upbringing as moving around? to get in front of a group of people to talk in my English class, college class. I remember I'd throw up before I would speak. I was terrified to get in front of a group of people. And quite frankly, I've always been uncomfortable in front of a group of people. Memorial Day 2018, they were looking for a speaker at Memorial Day in Chaska. And I'll do it. Oh, was I worried about that. I dreamt about that. I was so stiff holding that paper. I thought if I took my eyes off the sentence, I'd lose it. And the place would blow up. Well, I've done several talks. I've gotten more comfortable. And I'm comfortable speaking at the Vietnam Wall. And it's not me. I'm representing the United States Navy.
Exactly.
I'm representing America. That's why I have the confidence to do that.
Well, and that's why people want to listen to you.
I believe so, yes.
Because they want to hear about all of it, about everyone.
Yes.
You're an everyman.
Yes.
It's beautiful. What would you want people to remember from your story? From your experiences?
The price of freedom is not free. And I believe that there's so many people who do not understand or appreciate what has been given to us. Just the fact to go to the Minnesota Viking game on Sunday. Think about those folks in Ukraine right now. Being bombed, their homes blown away. That same thing could happen here. And I'm so appreciative of our forefathers and what they've done for us. So the question, what do I want people to remember from this? To remember the price and to appreciate what's been done. And that there are so few people now who are serving our country. There's only, I think, about 1% of the people who are actually serving our country now. That's what I would ask them to remember. And to, whenever possible, to step forward and to thank a veteran and to help people who aren't veterans. Think about your fellow man or woman who is in need of help. Reach out.
Last question.
The last question. Wow, this is going to be a heavy-duty one, I'm afraid.
What do you wish more people knew about veterans?
I think it's kind of been a theme of what I've talked about. That they don't understand what veterans have done for them. They don't understand the price that veterans have paid for them. And I think that this is the reason why when I give my talk and I talk about people who burn the flag and kneel when the national anthem is played, that they're not offended. All I'm trying to do is to teach them, to have them understand that there are men and women who have paid that price for them. My God, why? Why can't they understand that? Why can't they appreciate that? Why can't they honor? But they feel we've been, in our life, we've been taken advantage of because of our minority status. This country has given every man, woman, and child more freedoms than any country in the history of this world. but not enough people understand that. So, from our talk today, Laura, I hope that they've learned a little bit about my feelings about what I would ask them to do or be.
I love that. I guess I do have one more.
Okay, please. Laura, I love talking. You didn't ask many questions as you want. Thank you.
This will be the last one.
Okay.
What message would you want to leave for your grandchildren? What do you want them to remember if you're talking to them?
Again, the theme of what we've already talked about, and that is that Grandpa was a part of those men and women who have given us our freedoms. Laura, I was so honored just recently. My grandson, two of my grandsons were starting defensive backs on the Chanhassen High School team who won the state championship this year. The younger grandson only weighs 155 pounds. He had as many tackles as the big guys did. And he was tackling those 200-pounders. And I said, Logan, how do you do it? He says, I get down low and I get them around their legs. And he did a great job. Well, the honor that I had, parents and grandparents were invited to the signings of 3 of the high school seniors. My grandson, Tyler, has signed with Minnesota Duluth football. And at that ceremony at Chanhassen High School, they had written up about what they were going to be doing, and one of the questions that were in the I can't remember the exact wording, but it was, who has been important in your life? And it was me. It was just, so moving. And I have the greatest 9 grandkids anybody could ever have.
And they have the greatest grandpa anybody could ever have.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mike, I cannot thank you enough for your time today. But more importantly, I can't thank you enough for your service to our country.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for continuing to serve and not just leaving it in the past, but talking about it and raising awareness. We are so grateful for you.
Thank you, Laura. It's been an honor for me to have this talk with you.
Thank you so much.